Hi, welcome to Freedom Rocks. We're continuing our ongoing interview series with the next junior senator from New York, Chris Eads. We ended last time talking about some possible constitutional amendments, which he'll be in a position to propose as a senator. One of the ones I'd like to see is Section 1. The value of a dollar shall be defined by law based on a fixed amount of a finite natural resource. Section 2. Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. So, you said before that you support this?
Yes. Well, I mean, the problem that we have now with fiat currency is that...
And you want to tell folks what fiat currency means?
Well, fiat currency is basically what we have now, whereby the money can just be issued in potentially unlimited amounts by the Federal Reserve.
So basically, its value is the only value it has is what the law says it has. It's not actually backed up by anything. I think the official value of a dollar is based on some basket of 6 international currencies.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how that works. But the problem with fiat currency in general is that human beings cannot be trusted not to just print money. It's been the downfall of pretty much every civilization that's tried it. We need to return to some kind of commodity-based currency. Now, whether that's gold or something else doesn't really matter. It could be petroleum, since the dollar is already basically the international trading currency for petroleum. It could be a basket of commodities. But the key thing here is that the dollar needs to be fixed as something of real value. Because what happens when new currency is issued is, first of all, it's issued by banks that loan it to our government at interest. And second of all, the people that benefit from that are the first people to receive that money from the government. They get essentially money that's created out of nothing, and the value of the dollar is thereby decreased, because when the supply of dollars increases, then the value of each individual dollar goes down, the value of the dollar in your pocket goes down. So we have a few well-connected people that get this money and they benefit while everyone else loses. That's why inflation is essentially a hidden tax.
Yeah, well, we actually had no inflation prior to the Federal Reserve Bank. So, for example, what George Washington paid for a suit is about the same as what Woodrow Wilson paid for a suit. Approximately the same number of dollars. It wasn't until they created the Federal Reserve Bank and the law essentially, I don't think it completely took us off the gold standard, but it allowed more leeway. It gave the Federal Reserve the authority to print dollars. So they were still backed by gold, but they weren't backed by a fixed amount.
Right, yeah.
So basically it was however many dollars exist are backed by however much gold is in the treasury. So while it was still backed by gold, and I think also silver, they could still print money out of thin air, and it was just worth less gold and silver.
Basically, yeah. I mean, from 1783 to 1913, the value of the dollar stayed the same. From 1913 till today, it's lost 96% of its value. This is a problem. It's a problem because, one thing, it discourages savings. And that creates, the problems that we've experienced with the lack of credit. We've evolved into a society based on debt. And the same way that people are overextended on their personal credit cards, our government on all levels, federal, state, and local, is burdened by debt. State and local governments, they have to issue bonds. They can't just print money. But a federal government can just basically say, have the quantitative easing, for example. I mean, it's something like $16 trillion has basically...
Pretty close. It's, last I checked, like 15.7 trillion.
Yeah, it'll be 16 trillion soon enough.
Yeah.
All that money is just created out of thin air. We're seeing inflation already. I mean, the only thing that's held back rampant inflation so far is
inflation in the other countries that our dollar is valued based on.
Right.
So, for example, we've got runaway spending. They're printing dollars out of thin air, printing more dollars out of thin air, but the value of a dollar, the legal value of a dollar, is based on this basket of other currencies. So, for example, even though we're printing money, thereby devaluing it, the European Union is also printing euros out of thin air. And whatever other countries are in that basket, I forget, they're all printing money out of thin air. So we're all devaluing our currency, but they can claim that there's no inflation because they're comparing it to other currencies that are also being devalued.
Right, yeah, but unfortunately, that's not going to continue like forever because there's only, for instance, so many cows that can produce beef. There's only so much. I mean, there's only so much actual productive labor. And that goes to a really fundamental problem with our economy. Is it's like a spreadsheet-based economy. I mean, you have people, for instance, like J.P. Morgan. Now, all of a sudden, it depends. I mean, they're saying, $3 billion just sort of vanished into thin air. By the time we're done, it could be like $24 billion. Because actually, the Federal Reserve issued some sort of, they have this thing called stress testing, which says that, for you to be considered solvent, if you're one of these too big to fail companies like J.P. Morgan, you need $24 billion in reserves. And this is a regulation that just came out recently. And you have to wonder, is the Federal Reserve basically saying that the liability of J.P. Morgan is $24 billion instead of $3 billion or $7 billion, depending on various estimates. I mean, the problem basically is that this money doesn't exist except on a spreadsheet. And then reality catches up and they say, this money isn't there. And people are holding securities that are now worthless.
I'm going to have to interrupt you there because we're coming up on a break. You're watching Freedom Rocks. Stay tuned.
Have you ever played WTF Sudoku?
You mean WTF as in what the f***?
Yes.
What the f*** is so all fired? What the f*** about Sudoku?
Regular Sudoku is played on a 9x9 grid with exactly one of every digit 1 through 9 in every row, column, and 3x3 grid.
So what?
WTF Sudoku is played on a 25x25 grid with exactly one of every letter A through Y in every row, column, and 5x5 group.
WTF. How can I play WTF Sudoku?
You can play it online at www.cybermansoftware.com/games. You can also buy a book of puzzles on Amazon.com. Just search for WTF Sudoku.
Book? You mean on paper?
Yes, that's correct.
So that's www.cybermansoftware.com/games or by searching for WTF Sudoku on Amazon.com?
Yes.
Did you know high-quality versions of all episodes of Freedom Rocks are available on DVD? Each DVD contains 3 episodes for just $15. We also have specials that aren't on RCTV or YouTube. You can find links to all of our DVDs on the Freedom Rocks website, freedomrocks.cybermansoftware.com.
Welcome back to Freedom Rocks. As always, I'd like to remind you that this is a cable access show. That means we don't get Nielsen ratings. So we don't know you're watching unless you tell us you're watching, which you can do right here, this website at the bottom of your screen, Freedom Rocks, that's freedomrocks.cybermansoftware.com. And once again, I'm speaking with the next junior senator from New York, Chris Eads. So you were saying before the break?
I was saying before the break that we need to have the dollar backed by actually something of value. In addition to the fact that it would no longer allow inflation, it also will no longer create the situation whereby we think we have money and we don't, which is basically the cause of the economic crisis that started in 2007, 2008.
That combined with them loaning money for houses that they knew darn well people couldn't afford to pay back when the interest rates rose.
Right, exactly. And all this, and these were securitized, basically through derivatives and other sort of financial chicanery, and represented as like AAA rated securities when in fact they were basically worth nothing at all. And people found themselves in the position of not having this money. Banks, expected that this money would come from mortgages, and they'd pass through all of these, different securities and derivatives and that sort of thing. And they found the money wasn't there, and so your money that you invested in the bank wasn't there. And
So now, do you still have that text file you forwarded a while ago about the bar that was giving away drinks on credit?
I don't
To
think
appear
so.
popular?
No, I don't think so. I had a hard drive failure.
Okay. Well, I'll look for it, see if I can find it. If I find it, it'll be right here at the Freedom. I'll link to it right here at the Freedom Rocks website. Anyways, proceed.
Well, I mean, I think I'm pretty much done with that topic. I mean, the fact is that
Okay.
the fiat currency, the fact that our dollar is not actually backed by something of value, creates a situation whereby money just goes poof, and it's not here. And we have these situations whereby the government needs to bail out the banks and print money to cover the fact that there's money that we thought we had that's not there, so let's just print it. And
Okay, now here's one about privacy. For anyone who's been bothered by the sheer number of questions they ask, highly personal questions they like to ask on the census, here's one. Section 1, the enumeration of persons conducted every 10 years shall not enumerate any quantity except the whole number of persons and number of persons qualified to vote under the laws of their respective states or the United States. Section 2, Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation.
right, well, that should be common sense. I mean, there's no reason for the government to ask so many questions about what you're doing and who you are. The purpose of the census is to determine how many people live there.
And the only purpose for that is to determine how many representatives each state gets in the House of Representatives.
Exactly. And
They don't need to know if you have a flush toilet for that. They don't need to know how many cell phones you have. They don't need to know how many televisions you have. They don't need to know your race other than the fact that the Constitution specifically excludes Native Americans. They don't need to know your sexual orientation. They don't need to know your marital status. They need to know how many of you there are.
Right, and it should be also spelled out that these are actual people that we can count. I believe that I think it was the Democratic Party that wanted to have some sort of estimate saying that, well, we can't count everybody, so we're going to multiply it by 1.2 or something.
The wording in the Constitution is actual enumeration.
Right.
I'm not sure what's unclear about that.
Yeah, I'm not sure what I think it probably would work out to be that, there would be more people counted in Democratic states and districts. It was not a fixed number to multiply. They were trying to say that in urban areas you get so many people were not going to be counted, in rural areas so many people are not going to be counted. It was a bad idea.
Yeah.
This would clarify the fact that that's not a good idea.
Well, actually, that doesn't really need clarification because it already says actual enumeration of the people. Whereas this one would prohibit them from asking anything other than how many people live in your house and are eligible to vote. No product, here's one, Section 1, no product manufactured in one state shall be subject to the laws of the United States relating to commerce among the states unless its first retail sale shall be in another state. Section 2, Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. Basically, there's a number of states that are passing laws to supersede or preempt federal law with respect to firearms. So, for example, I think Montana is one of them, where if a gun is manufactured in Montana and it stays within Montana, it's not subject to any federal law.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And you could say the same thing about, for instance, medical marijuana dispensaries. I mean, the Commerce Clause has been, basically abused to allow the federal government to do anything and everything and extend its power into the reach of every corner that it can extend into.
And beyond.
Right, exactly. I mean, the Constitution was designed to have a limited role for the federal government and for the states to handle things that are internal to the states. And we should
now,
not...
I noticed one potential problem with the state preemption laws is that they say if the gun is manufactured in one state and it stays within that state, now the feds can always claim that it didn't stay within that state. That's why this specifically clarifies that it's only subject to interstate laws if its first sale is in another state. That way there's some record of where it was first sold. You don't have to get into the nitpicky details of whether some owner of it carried it out of state and back.
Right, yeah. I mean, that's always a possibility. But it's, once you open the door to that, then the whole, it just becomes meaningless.
And after the break, we'll go over just how far-reaching the Supreme Court even said the federal government can go. You're watching Freedom Rocks. We'll be right back.
As you may have noticed, you can watch Freedom Rocks for free on RCTV or on YouTube, but it takes money to produce good quality TV shows. You can support Freedom Rocks by shopping at our Cafe Press shop. There you can find t-shirts for men and women, tote and gym bags, coffee mugs, beer steins, food and beverage thermoses, and a bunch of other items Cafe Press offers. You can find our shop at cafepress.com/freedomrocks, all lowercase and no apostrophe.
Welcome back to Freedom Rocks. As always, we're partially underwritten by my books, Hex Sudoku and WTF Sudoku, both of which are available on a website we can't name. We also can't name any rivers in South America.
Correct.
Before the break, we were talking about interstate commerce. In the Gonzalez versus Raich Supreme Court case, the Supreme Court ruled that federal law trumps state law with respect to purely intrastate activities with respect to people who grow their own marijuana within California's compassionate use law. And their rationale was that by growing the marijuana themselves instead of buying it, they're decreasing the demand in their community. By smoking it themselves instead of selling it, they're decreasing the supply in their community. While one person may not have an appreciable impact on interstate commerce, if everybody who's eligible under California's compassionate use law did that, that would dramatically affect interstate commerce in marijuana, and therefore it could be regulated under interstate commerce. As Judge Andrew Napolitano said in his book, Constitution in exile, the court, or the government prosecutors blew smoke about Wickard, and the court inhaled. And the Wickard case is Wickard versus Filburn, where a farmer was convicted of growing too much wheat.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, that's like basically saying, the government should regulate the ability of a butterfly to flap its wings in China because it might cause a tornado here in the United States. I mean, you could apply the same thing. If you grow tomatoes in your backyard, you are technically increasing the supply of tomatoes, and that will affect the interstate commerce in tomatoes. But, that's ridiculous. Because, like I said, it opens the door to regulating anything and everything. And then what is the point of even having the Commerce Clause in the Constitution at all? Instead of, you might as well just say, okay, do whatever you want. It turns logic on its head.
Yeah. But basically, the Supreme Court agreed with the government prosecutors that what you do in the privacy of your home affects interstate commerce, and therefore it can be regulated as interstate commerce. Let's see. Were there any other particular ones you wanted to go over?
Let's see.
No religious test. That might be a good one.
Let's see. I mean, certainly here, neither the United States nor any state shall make or enforce any law which shall deny, abridge, or regulate personal relationships between or among adults. And, Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. I mean, certainly, the government has no business in your bedroom. It has no business, telling you what you can do in your personal relationships at all. I mean, we should follow the principle of consenting adults in this matter. It's just not the government's business. I mean, in that, I'm not sure. Why? I mean, personally, I would say, First Amendment, protects the freedom of association, and that should be obvious. But unfortunately, it has been interpreted in many different ways. And has required, extensive litigation, for instance, things like sodomy laws, and quite frankly, I mean, it
wasn't that long ago that sodomy was a criminal offense in New York, and I'm talking about consensual sodomy.
Right, yeah. I mean, it's, and down in Texas, they overturned the sodomy law because it only applied to gay people, and they said, well, like it violates, the 14th Amendment and equal protection. But really, I mean, that's just, there shouldn't be a law against that at all. I mean, you should be able to do whatever you want to do it.
Consenting adults.
Right, consenting adults. Well, I mean, that should be obvious.
Should be obvious, but we'll state it anyway.
Yeah, no, definitely consenting adults. But yeah, I mean, it's just not the government's business.
Right. Now, the other issue that relates to is marriage. For example, there's a number of folks pushing for a constitutional amendment to define marriage as between one man and one woman. Well, why? Why not allow for same-sex marriage? Why not allow for polygamy, etc.? Any legitimate reason?
Well, I mean, it's basically based on people's personal moral ideas. I mean, we get in a situation whereby the majority believes that your personal relationship should be ordered in a certain manner, and they impose it on everybody else. But really, you should be able to make your own decisions. I mean, should the government even regulate marriage at all? I think is a question that needs to arise. I mean, is it really even the government's business? I mean, it's essentially just a prenuptial contract that you could draw up yourself. It just, disposition of assets, Social Security benefits and things like that. It really does not have, insofar as the government is involved, any sort of, moral religious sanction. So, there's no reason to have any kind of standard there. So, yeah.
What about this one? Section 1, no religious test shall be a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States or any state, territory, or district, or any political subdivision within any state, territory, or district. Section 2, Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation.
Right. I mean, obviously, holding an office or position of public trust, you know, if you're an atheist, then you should be allowed to do that. I mean, you shouldn't have to swear a religious oath by God if you don't believe in Him.
Currently, the Constitution forbids it for offices under the United States itself, but there are certain states that explicitly prohibit someone who's an atheist from holding any form of public office. In Texas, you can't even be on a jury unless you take the religious oath. Just a little food for thought until we see you next time. This is the show's website. Let us know what you think, what you like, what you don't like, and we'll see you next time.
Did you know Freedom Rocks has swag? You can help stimulate the economy and show how much you like Freedom Rocks at the same time. We've got t-shirts for men and women. We've got coffee mugs and beer steins. We've got food and beverage thermoses. You can get your own Freedom Rocks swag with the show logo, as seen in the opening title of the show, right here at our Cafe Press shop. That's cafepress.com/freedomrocks.